Welcome to Conversations with Aaliyah. Tune in for inspiration, information, and upliftment as creatives and entrepreneurs share their journeys, challenges, and successes.
Thank you, Vanessa, so much for joining me here on this podcast, also known as Van Haney as your pen name for the books that you write. And I'm gonna do a little intro on you. Vanessa grew up in the new age circus known as the entertainment industry. She was first published in an anthology of poems in 1997. She was showcased in young filmmaker competitions for her screenplays. And in 2018, while getting her master's in education, she self-published her first book of short stories, Stories to Curl Your Toes. Now, after 2 children and a move to the Pacific Northwest, Vanessa, also known as Van Haney, she's now unleashing her stories into the world once again. Yay! So let's start on your journey. What do you mean you grew up in the Hollywood circus?
So I grew up fourth generation in film. So my great grandfather, my grandmother, both of my parents are in the film industry. My dad worked at Warner Brothers for 25 years and worked on films as a special effects artist and in construction. And my mom is a makeup artist, and she did a lot of prosthetic makeup artists for or makeup for major films. And then she also did television makeup. So one of the things that I always enjoyed about the film industry is just the massive presence and familial aspects of it. So when a film or TV show is being made, uh, there are tons of trailers. I'm sure most people have seen like tons of trailers and lights and people swarming around. And they call those trailers, that caravan of trucks and trailers, a circus sometimes. And so I
Ah,
always thought that it was like growing up in a circus. I would go to
yeah.
set with my parents. Everyone would be, like aunts and uncles to me. And everyone wanted to talk to you and help you and show you around and teach you things. And so it was very much like growing up in a circus. The tents go up, the lights go up, and people perform and entertain the masses. And then they rip it all down and they move it to the next place.
Right. Oh my God, I never thought of that. That's so cool. And you're right. Like this is a fantastic perspective to hear from a child who goes to these, right? So this is awesome. So you grew up, it sounds so warm and loving. And then and so you actually started doing stuff within the entertainment industry yourself originally. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
So at 3, I started acting, and I was on General Hospital a few times. I was on
What?
Diagnosis Murder a few times. And then I traveled with some theatrical productions. So I would
Yes.
be out of school for a few months at a time, with a Shakespeare company, with a Christmas Carol company. So I did a lot of acting up until about high school,
Mm-hmm.
when I started to focus more on doing film. I
Mm-hmm.
wish I had paid more attention to what I was good at before I went to film school,
Yeah.
because I probably would have decided to be a screenwriter instead of focus on directing. But I had
Mm.
this like idea and this passion that I was going to be a director.
Yeah.
And then once I left film school, I was like, I don't want to do this. Like I don't like this part of it as
Yeah.
much. And so I ended up doing more writing, and then I actually did film sales for 8 years, where I was a vice
Wow.
president of communications for a film sales company. So I traveled internationally and I sold feature films to companies like Netflix and HBO and Disney, and different broadcasters all over the world. And then
Wow.
kind of went back to my passion where I just enjoy reading and writing. Um,
Yes. This is a ton of stuff, like in a very short amount of time. Okay. You did the acting, thought you found your passion as a into directing, went to film school to direct, realized, learned, which is fantastic. There's no way you would have known if you didn't do it, that it wasn't for you. So then you got into sales with film sales. Now, okay, so I want to go into that a little bit because that's not something that a lot of people that I'm aware of talk about or really even know about. So for 8 years, how did you get into, after graduating, decided not to do directing? You got into film sales and then you stayed there for 8 years. So what was that like? How did you get into it and what got you out?
Um, well, I was dating somebody who lived in Las Vegas and I lived in LA, and
Yeah.
I was working for a manager and an agent, and I was working for post-production, rental, and um like live event company. And
Okay.
so I had like three different jobs, and I was bouncing around part-time at all these different places
Yeah.
trying to figure out what my next step was, and I was
Sure.
interviewing to be an agent, and I was like, maybe this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
But I was dating somebody who lived in Las Vegas and I lived in LA, and this opportunity came up to go to Las Vegas and to be uh, like an outside contractor as a consultant for this
Uh-huh.
live event company. So I went, but it was only for 3 months. And I knew that. So I
Uh-huh.
kept my apartment in LA. But at the end of 3 months, my boyfriend was like, I don't really want you to go back. And I was like, I don't really want to go back. But
Aw.
I didn't have a job lined up.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, we were supposed to go to Coachella. I was like, when we come back from Coachella, if I don't have a job, I'm going back to LA to have all of these part-time jobs. And I interviewed for a job 2 days after we came back from Coachella with
Hmm.
Shoreline Entertainment. They
Yeah.
have an LA office and a Las Vegas office. And I interviewed in Las Vegas, and I was the last interview of the day. I was there with he at the time was the vice president. Now he is the CEO. But I interviewed with him. I sat with him for like 3 hours, and he was like, okay, you're hired. You're going to be my
Wow.
assistant. And I was like, okay. And he was like, we're going to the Cannes Film Festival in a few weeks. You're going. And I was like, okay. And so
Oh my God.
I became like his right hand person. And for a few years, I was his assistant. Then I moved into kind of handling a lot of the interactions between the filmmakers and the company, because they had, I think at the time, around 700 filmmakers that they talked to and sent reports to every year.
Wow.
So I started working in that area, and then just started managing everything that had to do with our communications at the company and became vice president. And I traveled
Wow.
3 to 4 months out of the year. So I went to Morocco and Japan and France and Italy and Korea and India. And I went all over. And I had this
Wow.
amazing boss who was great about teaching me how to be an entrepreneur and how to really market yourself and a company.
Yeah.
And it was a great opportunity. But once I was married and my husband and I were talking about having kids,
Yeah.
it just wasn't feasible to have this life where I traveled all the time. And it was a high stress job.
Mm.
So you have to think like about 1 to 3% of films make their money back.
Wow.
So, or make a little bit of a profit.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to communicate with a bunch of filmmakers whose passion goes into this film,
Oh.
and it just isn't making the amount of money that they expected it to make. Um,
Oh.
and I mean, it's the same with acting, right? Like 3% of actors make a lot of money and the rest don't.
Yeah.
So it's just how the industry is. But it was high stress, and I enjoyed doing it, but it just wasn't going to be a good fit for my life any longer.
Right, right. Because your priorities changed.
Yes.
Yeah. That is so fascinating. That you got this job as an assistant, 3 hour interview. That's amazing. If you were to look back, would there be any way for you to have like known the path that you would have taken to get to?
No.
Yeah, right? Like who
I've
would
had
know?
I have a master's in education. I got
Okay.
that at the end of my career at Shoreline.
Yes.
I've been a teacher for a few years. I don't know. I think one of the things about my life is that I tend to just say yes when people are like, "Oh, do
Mm.
you want to do this?" I'm like, "Yes." And
Yes.
then I get into these crazy adventures or these
Yes.
new career paths, and then
Yes.
I'm like, "Oh, well, this is neat. I wonder
Yeah.
what the next thing is."
I love that so much. Because you just this is kind of like improv. You just say yes and then you
Yeah,
go, right? As long
I
as
did
it's
a
in
lot of improv.
alignment. Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I love improv so much.
Yes, and
Yes,
I
and yeah.
think that's yeah, I think probably like being an improv from like high school into college probably affected that where I'm like, yes, okay, and now what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
Um, oh, something that I think is interesting if people don't know is one of the ways that we sell films is that we have catalogs. And so we would, by the end of my tenure at Shoreline, we had digital catalogs, but
Hmm.
we would bring a tablet and it would have like a little picture of the film and the title, the like how long it was, whatever the runtime was, and then it would have like a blurb about it.
Yep.
And we would literally ask people, what are you looking for your television station or for your streaming service or whatever? And they would tell us what they're looking for. And we
Yeah.
would literally go through and tell the story. So you would
Wow.
stop on something and be like, this is brand new. And then you would tell the story of what the
Yeah.
film is about. And then they
Wow.
would be interested or not, you'd go to the next one. So you would just sit there and tell stories over and over and over. And I
Wow.
think that's something else that I really liked about the job was that I got to like memorize short synopsis for all of these movies. And a lot of them I watched. There was like
Yeah.
100 and something that I watched, but you could just kind of tell the
Wow.
story. It was just fun.
This is so fascinating because I think, like, I didn't really know the middleman. It's almost like a middleman portion that nobody ever hears about in general. Like, you just know there's indie films, or not you, I just know there's indie films. Um, I know there's shorts, and I know there's stuff on, the mainstream, right? Like Netflix, the digital networks, or features, right? On
Mhm.
blockbuster movie theaters. But you're the people who gather people's films, they're completed. You decide to put them into, when you were in Shoreline, into your roster. And then you would pitch that group of stories that you guys already curated to Netflix or Warner Brothers or whoever. And they're telling you, okay, we want a thriller, or they're saying we're wanting science fiction. You'll be like, okay, here's this, and they say yes or no, and you tell them the synopsis, the story of each of those,
And then we send them screeners. So whatever they like, those are the ones that we send them.
and that's the next step.
And it means sometimes, you're telling them 50 films, right? You might sit there for an hour and go through a whole bunch of films. Um,
Wow.
or they might be very particular and be like, it has to have a celebrity in it. And you're
Mm,
like, okay. So
yeah.
then you maybe have a shorter number, like maybe you have 25 since you've last seen them that have a celebrity.
Right.
Um, and a lot of it, we would keep track of what we've shown them in the past. So we would have an idea of what we've previously pitched them. So
Yeah.
we knew not to repeat certain things. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's really interesting, and I didn't know until I was working in it that that's really one of the main ways that independent films get out there.
Wow, that's really cool. That's great to know. This is so good for people who are making independent films. Um,
Oh, and they
do
handle
you?
festivals too. So
Yeah.
sometimes we would pick up films at festivals that we really liked. Other
Oh.
times we want films that haven't been in any festivals
Uh-huh.
because we actually pitch the Cannes Film Festival in Toronto and Berlinale and
Yeah.
there's all of these film festivals that we actually worked with directly. And so those were ones that we had the opportunity to pitch to the people who are actually making the decisions rather
Yes.
than it going through like intern after intern before it gets to them.
Wow.
So yeah, we also would handle festivals. So we would be sitting there before the festivals would announce, we knew that we had three contenders
Yeah.
and we're waiting to see if they got picked or not. And then it's really exciting if they
Gosh.
do get picked for Sundance or
Yes.
TIFF or something, then we would
Yes.
throw like a party or we would do like big events
Yeah.
to support that film.
Right. Now, question for the films that you're pitching for, like that you've acquired for your company, do you guys actually purchase those? No, you're
No.
just,
We work as a sales agent. So we just like a agent for acting or something. We
yeah.
would take like 30% or
Okay.
whatever the percentage was that we negotiated. Yeah.
Oh, that's
I don't know
actually
what it
really
is
cool.
anymore. So
Right.
if somebody's watching and they're reaching out to Shoreline, I don't know the current percentage. I
Yeah.
do know Sam Eigen is fantastic. Steve Macy is fantastic. I
Okay.
still talk to Sam all the time.
Nice.
So
Nice. Okay, cool, cool. And then now I have to ask, like, how do independent filmmakers get in touch with people, like, to be able to pitch to Shoreline or somebody else?
I mean, they definitely can check on the on websites, obviously.
Uh-huh.
Shoreline is listed on a lot of websites, but because they do a lot of business to business work,
Yeah.
Sanando was a site that we would often use. That was created by the Cannes Film Festival.
Mm-hmm.
So that one was a good one. There's lots of places that you could find sales agents. So you could just look up film sales agents and
Yeah.
you should find a
Wow.
list of them that you could reach out to.
And this is primarily feature films, though, right? Or shorts as
Um,
well, or
I don't know if they're doing shorts. There was a period before I left where we had started doing shorts. I'm not sure if they still are. I know that Shoreline opened up a distribution wing where they are distributing films as well,
mm-hmm.
um, mostly
Oh,
digital, I think. So
yeah.
some of the films will get put into that digital release through them. But yeah, so generally you would just reach out to the company, send some sort of a query email, and then they would get back and say that they
Okay.
were interested or not. Usually it's
Yeah.
films that haven't been anywhere. So if you've
Yeah.
already released it yourself, they're not going to
No
be as
bueno.
interested. Yeah.
Yeah. If it's already been in festivals, no good.
I mean, it depends on the
It depends.
festivals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for sure, if you've already put it up like on Amazon yourself, or you already have it on
Yeah.
Tubi or something,
Yeah.
that'll reduce the interest.
Okay.
I think that's
This
across
is,
the board. The
yeah.
same for me writing books, right? When I
Yeah.
write a book, if I've
Yeah.
self-published it, no distributor, no publisher is going to want it.
Right. Right. And I'm glad you bring that up because we digressed and but I found that fascinating. I found that whole entire subject matter completely fascinating because it's like almost brand new to me, right? And I feel like that would be really helpful to any independent filmmakers that are trying to get out there. But back to you. Yes. So, and thank you for sharing that because that's huge. All right. So, priorities change. You want to be a
Yeah.
mom, you leave,
Yes.
right? And so,
Yes.
how was that? Like, was that scary? How did you finally make that decision to change? And then did you know what to do next for you?
So Sam was my boss, and we sat down many, many times where I was like, I just don't enjoy this, like handling the films and the filmmakers as much as I used to, and I
Yeah.
don't know what to do. And he
Yeah.
was like, you should stay. And I was like, I know, but I
Oh,
don't know that I want to.
yeah.
And so he supported me going back to school and getting my
Oh,
master's degree.
yeah.
So I worked at Shoreline through that process. And really, I had been volunteering at homeless shelters to teach art and
Mm-hmm.
cooking and things like that. And my husband was like, the happiest I see you is when you come back from teaching. Why don't you try being a teacher?
Yeah.
So I took one of the entry level courses to see if I would enjoy it, and I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
So I got my master's degree, and then it just seemed like it was a good fit. And I
Yeah.
liked teaching English and I liked being part of that community. There were so many comparisons that I could make between the school community and a film set, just with like everybody's working together, they get to know each other, they support each other, you're there for long hours, you're there, sometimes on the weekends and sometimes at night to support students, and everybody's
Mm.
kind of working towards this common goal. And so it felt like a great fit. Um, and so I think now that I'm in the Pacific Northwest and I haven't been teaching as like the teacher of record or having my own classroom, now I have kind of looked back and been like, oh, there are things that I miss about Shoreline. I miss kind of being in charge of things or having these responsibilities.
Yeah.
Um, but I have other priorities. And so it's hard to like, I know that I don't want to go back to doing that full time. And I know that I'm remembering the really good parts and maybe not all of like the hard parts.
Right.
But definitely there's sometimes where I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Or I called Sam and I talked to him and I'm like, oh, I miss working for you.
Aw.
But
Yeah.
I definitely don't think that it's the right time to go back to doing that.
Right. Right. Backtracking a little bit in terms of timeline. When you got your master's and you left, and by the way, it sounds like Sam is a fantastic person, but you,
Yes.
so you left. How many years? And so you've been teaching. When did you move to the Pacific Northwest? Was it right then, when you got your
No.
master's and you left Shoreline?
Well, I was approved to teach in 2019 at the end of 2019. So I
Okay.
started teaching in 2020 and then
Uh-huh.
COVID happened.
Right.
So I was helping out at Shoreline part-time
Mm-hmm.
while all of that was going on. And I was doing the virtual teaching, which in Las Vegas
Okay.
was very minimal
Okay.
up until the next year. So I was doing both of those things for a while.
Okay.
And then I stayed in Las Vegas
Uh-huh.
until 2022. And then we
Okay.
moved in 2022 to Portland.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And then, so now that you're in 2022 Portland, right? And you are still teaching,
I actually
or
got a job as an
yes,
admin
as an
at a
admin
school.
at a
I
school.
did not like it.
Okay, okay, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Did you quit?
I went on maternity leave, and then
Yes.
when they wanted to know if I wanted to come
Congratulations.
back this
Yes.
last January, I was like, no,
Yeah. Yeah.
don't. So I started substitute teaching and doing this home instruction program where like I
Yes.
work for the district, and if there's a student that's too sick to go to
Mm.
school or too injured, then
Yeah.
I go to their house and I help them with all of their schoolwork.
Oh, you
Um,
go to their house.
yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But I work for the
Nice.
district. So
Yeah.
the teachers that are their normal gen ed teachers, they provide the work and I
Yes.
just help them with it and make sure their schedule is organized, proctor
Okay.
tests, things like that.
And do you do this full time?
No, so that's just a
Okay.
part-time job. Yeah.
Okay. Because I want to know, like, how do we tie in? When did the writing, because you did screenplays, we haven't gotten into any of that. So, like, how did the screenplays where you were writing screenplays tie in? I'm doing this. Okay. Tie in. And as well as authoring books. Like, how and when did all that come together? Because right now, it sounds like that's your main focus that you're transitioning to. Is that right?
I mean, I would really like for that to be my main focus. I have two kids right now, so two
How old
very
are
little
they?
kids. I have
Yes.
a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old.
Yay. So cute.
And my husband is very busy with his activities, so I try
Hmm.
and support him as well. I'm lucky that I think this year is going
Yeah.
to be a lot more focused on writing and more on the goals that we have.
Yeah.
But up until now, writing has really been something that I do early in the morning or in the evening to get it out on paper.
Yeah.
I started writing 15 years ago. I started writing like novels that I wanted to do. It started
Yeah.
with Bizarro books, which is like a very niche genre
Okay.
of kind of I don't even know, like absurd, but like usually with pop culture references, sometimes
Yeah.
sexual, sometimes horror, but they're very weird.
Okay.
And I started with that 15 years ago, and then it kind of went on the back burner. I was writing short stories, and then in 2019, when I was pregnant with my son, I had a bunch of short stories that I had written, and I was like, I want to publish these. I want to publish them by the time I have him.
Yes.
I want something that's like out there in the world as like a legacy. This is something that's out there that I did. And
Mm.
so I published those
Yeah.
and they've done pretty well. I've sold somewhere around 6,000 copies, which for an independent book, my first one, learning the ropes on how to do things, I was pretty excited about. And so that was about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And then when I was going on maternity leave with my daughter, I was like, I want to publish another book. So I got together all of the stuff that I had been working on for the last few years. And then I wrote, I think, 4 or 5 brand new stories. And then I published that.
Yeah.
And then I did a YA fantasy book that I also published.
And these are all
And
self-published right now so
yeah.
far? Okay.
So,
Okay.
I think that being in distribution has tainted the traditional publishing world for me.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think that just knowing how waterfalls work in contracts and knowing how the deals work with, your agent and then your publisher and then the actual people distributing your books, it's hard for me to just go out there and find an agent. So I've never actually made that effort. And I think
Sure.
it's really because of the fact that I worked as a sales agent for so long.
Yeah.
Um,
You
but
know how the sausage is made.
I do. And so I think that part of me is like, well, why can't I do it myself? Because I know the process already.
Right.
The last year, I started my social media. I started to really
Explain more about your
focus.
social media too.
Yeah, so I think that acting really played a huge role in my understanding of characters, which is probably
Uh-huh.
why I was into screenwriting and why I love writing novels.
Right.
But also it kind of played a factor in my understanding of social media. And
Mm.
so the idea of like finding your niche, what is it that people find interesting about you? What can you kind of bump up to make more of your personality? And so it
Mm.
took me a while with my social media to figure out exactly where my audience was.
Yes.
And I think in the last 3 or 4 months, I started to tell ghost stories. So things
Mm.
that I've experienced, things that I've read, things that people have told me, places that I go. I just started to tell ghost stories, and people
Yeah.
have started to really respond to it. So
Yeah.
I have an Instagram, but it's my TikTok where I have videos about telling ghost stories that people have really loved.
What is your TikTok and Instagram if you want to?
So my Instagram is dystopian ness, and that's specifically for horror writing,
Yeah.
for all of my books. And then my TikTok is Van Haney Books, and that's where it has a longer format for videos than Instagram does, and so that's where my videos have really taken off.
Nice, nice.
Yeah,
Okay, so you've been writing because it's always been something that's been a part of you because you've been doing it
yeah,
for 15 years
yeah.
while you were
Writing has
doing
always been.
everything else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Writing has always been part of my life, just like a really great stress release. If things are, frustrating for me, writing has been that outlet.
Oh,
And my mom, did horror makeup my entire life. We watched a lot of horror films. And
yeah,
so I've always had this interest in the macabre and the bizarre and the odd. And so
yeah,
it's everything that I've written usually has something to do with like fantasy and horror. And that's just kind of continued on
yeah,
as I've gotten older, just m- being able to take life experiences and kind of rewrite them in more of like a horror format has been great. This most recent book has a lot to
yes.
do with having a baby. It's about
Oh,
a hybrid baby that
yes.
this woman gets impregnated with.
Yeah.
And it all happens very fast and it's graphic and it's hard. And I think that a lot of it comes from, having my daughter and being like, how can I reimagine this in
Yeah.
like a way that's sort of a metaphor for what it's like to be a parent in those first few
Mm,
years.
yeah.
And so there's a lot more to it because it's a horror book, and so
Yes.
that it's about Upior and like they're kind of the predecessors to vampires and this
Ooh,
LA rave lifestyle that
yes.
gets just torn away when she becomes pregnant with this hybrid baby.
Yeah.
But a lot of that comes from just personal experiences of when I was in LA and my lifestyle and how fun it was, and then kind of like juxtaposition with what it's like to be a parent.
Wow. Okay, what is the name of this book? Do you have a title
It's
yet?
right now it is called Safest in the Light. We'll see when I have beta readers read it if they like that title.
Okay, okay. This most recent one isn't quite done.
Right.
Okay,
So this one is going to be going to beta readers and an editor in
okay.
the next few weeks, and then it should be out in October.
Nice. This has been fantastic, Vanessa. It's not enough time, honestly. Like to me, I'm like, I need more. Tell us what is going on with you in the next, like in rest of August, September, October, how we can find you, other books that you can promote.
So, August 13th, 14th, and 15th, my second book of short stories, Bloody Ever After, is going on sale. It will be free for those 3 days as a digital download on Amazon.
Nice.
So, whether you just want to read it on your phone or your computer, or you have a Kindle, whatever device you use, it will be free. So, please download it, enjoy it. That is my second book. It is 9 stories that are kind of reimagined fairy tales into
Mm.
more current horror stories. I
Mhm.
also have Stories to Curl Your Toes, which was my first book.
Yeah,
That one is a bunch of short stories. It is very short. It's something that you could read in one sitting, and that's also available on Amazon.
nice.
And you can find me on TikTok most of the time. I also have books that go out with the Northwest Independent Authors.
Mm.
So that I think it's Northwest Independent Writers Association, but they have events that they go to all over the Pacific Northwest. So my books are usually available through them as well.
Fantastic. And mostly, can we find your books on Amazon for sure?
Yes, for
Okay,
sure on Amazon.
okay.
And then, yeah, follow me on TikTok and
Yeah.
listen to my ghost stories. And I'm going to be doing some giveaways where I'm going to give away 2 of my books with some other like fun little treasures. So,
Nice.
yeah, follow me.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to Conversations with Aaliyah Lay. I'd love to hear from you. Follow me on Instagram at Aaliyah Lay, ALYALEI.